Welcome, race fans, to another episode of the More Than Made podcast. My name is Jake Langdon,
And I'm Alan Langdon.
and we are back after what ended up being a crazy week and a half here as silly season came off with a bang here as, of course, Scott Dixon, the 25 years with Chip Ganassi, is exiting and joining McLaren for at least the next couple seasons here, as well as Felix Rosenqvist, the 2026 Indy 500 winner, joining. This announcement obviously has been around the rumors here for the last couple of weeks, but to see it come to reality after, the six-time champion, literally every race but his first win was with Chip Ganassi, so pretty absurd. We'll get into that a little bit more, and as well as doing a full-on silly season preview, as we're kind of behind the eight ball now, but we'll give you kind of fill in the rest of the paddock, and then of course give you a preview of the Borchetta Bourbon, what is it? Nashville something. The race at Nashville, Borchetta Bourbon Music City. Oh, it's Grand Prix, right? Music City Grand Prix.
It's Grand Prix,
yeah, of course. So we'll give you a preview of that as well as our predictions. So just hopping right in though, first with Mid-Ohio. First thoughts from the weekend, Alan.
Yeah, so broad weekend viewpoints. Palou, not in the Fast Six, was a win there. Palou, not in the podium, also a win there. So good things for the championship. Overall, pretty solid race from a strategy standpoint, good competition, and a good amount of battle and strategy. I think one of the biggest surprises was 0 incidents, which kind of kills our incident report bit. But overall, I'd say a good race. I mean, Mid-Ohio has kind of always been mid in its general impressions, but it delivered enough that I consider it a good race.
Yeah, that thin ribbon, this race has never really produced a ton of wrecks, especially if they don't happen early on. Everyone just kind of gets spread out. It's a pretty long track, so you don't have as much lap traffic going on until pretty late in there. Yeah, we only had 5 lead changes as opposed to 8 last year. Really, I think only 1 on track when O'Ward got by Lundgaard, but really the more interesting storyline was the fact that Christian Lundgaard, who qualified on pole, lost his seat after this race, and it just came off a win the week before, as well as a win earlier in the season. So someone who's in the championship hunt right now, multiple race winner in the same season, all those things, to not be guaranteed the same seat the next year is pretty crazy. Again, we'll get into the thick of that in a little bit, but yeah, so he qualified on pole. He is currently 3rd in the standings, 65 points back from Alex Palou, and honestly ran a really good race. But I think, listening to him after the race, it sounded like his setup was just not quite where it needed to be in traffic. So when he got caught up behind, I think it was either the lap car, it was one of the ECR
I want to say it was. Yeah, I think it was Rossi and then Grosjean, both kind of in that back pit. And then Schumacher could have been an issue towards the end, but O'Ward never actually caught up to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then O'Ward was able to pounce on that, and then just, ran clean stints after that, was able to take control from there. So, O'Ward obviously won here on our inaugural hybrid race. So he's won 2 of the 3 runnings here with the hybrid. So despite Palou's dominance, has really actually found quite a groove here. Really, really impressed by him. But yeah, overall the weekend, started out Palou, losing his streak of consecutive poles and not even making the Fast Six, which was pretty crazy. And then carrying that on into a sweep of McLaren after all the drama, which they love, all coming together with them having their best weekend in team history. Like what a crazy weekend.
Absolutely. And then you have a lot of others kind of side quest stories. So Kyle Kirkwood started 10th, finished 3rd. So great climb for him. And usually Andretti's have a lot of different boogeymen, but it goes to show you when a team doesn't have a pit fumble, what they can actually do on track. I think also worthwhile talking about Rinus VeeKay, another top 5, the second this year, and tied for the most of any Juncos driver in a season, which we're not even halfway through yet. He really has, I think, been out driving that car. And we'll talk about more as someone who's been more or less slept on, but certainly had everything there. Just really, it came down to that last pit window, 2 seconds longer than the Andretti's and McLaren's in terms of his pit. So that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I mean, Rinus VeeKay just starting in sixth, finishing in fourth. The fact that he's not only bringing pace to qualifying with a Juncos Hollinger car, but also bringing pace to the race is really unheard of. I mean, you've had guys have moments in these cars. I know Daly's done well in the ovals, but to bring a smaller Chevy car, I mean, obviously Chevy had a really good weekend as a whole, but to bring a smaller Chevy car like that up into the field on a road course is just it takes a lot of talent, and as someone as we head into silly season, you wonder like how can this guy continue to be sitting on a junior team without a big seat contract when he's doing things like beating Alex Palou on one of his best courses straight up on pace like that's just that yeah that he really does have something special, and with the oval speed he's found when he's in Chevys, I think that he's definitely a candidate for one of those bigger seats for next year.
Yeah, I think beyond that, kind of same old. Scott Dixon had a really rough race weekend as a whole. Multiple penalties during quals for holding up Grosjean, just some miscommunication there. And then during the race, although there was no yellows, Dixon probably had his fair share of tire rubbing with Ericsson and a number of other drivers, which put him all the way down in 17th. So again, a really kind of average to pretty poor year for Dixon this time. So hoping to see him kind of turn it around the back end of the year and maintain that winning streak, or at least one win per season.
Yeah, though, the king of Mid Ohio did not quite find anything. He got two. I think it was Rossi and Ericsson were the ones. They both got avoidable contact, which caught like penalties, which moved them back 2 places each. So just a very forgettable weekend for Dixon through all the drama. Outside of him, I think obviously a good recovery drive by Armstrong from 24th to 14th, but nothing else besides I thought Collette and Siegel both putting 11th and 10th place finishes together. Some of the younger guys having success, and then Christian Rasmussen, someone who I think has continued to improve on these road courses. I just the fact that he's had speed to qualify in the Fast Six as well as be able to maintain it for someone who's really known for his short ovals, like that shows me, like especially in an ECR car, that there is some potential to be a race winner on these courses at some point. I don't know if it'll come along, but he'll definitely be competing for podiums, which, if the series ever shifts more towards ovals in the future, then maybe he could compete for a championship. But either way, it's interesting to see him put together, well-rounded performances after being so inconsistent earlier in the year.
Yeah. So with all that shuffling out, and for those of us that are doing the math, both Kirkwood and Lundgaard placed ahead of Palou, which helped to reduce the lead now to 56 points. Now, we laugh, but that is a meaningful margin compared to this point last year, which was 113 points, which Pato O'Ward in 5th has 94. So in general, the top 5 in terms of like the championship as a whole is much more competitive than last year. I think part of that is Palou really didn't have that great of a car. He made some mistakes going wide and having some off strategy, but even as well as he drove, he still finished 5th. So again, it's one of those where even on his off days, he's still getting really good results. It isn't enough that they close the gap, but enough that like it's still within contention. And now that we're going to another oval, again, Palou's less than strong suits. So curious to see how this continues to evolve.
Yeah, the whole championship, I'm not sold that he's gonna not win it, but I will say like there's a possibility. There's a route for someone else to win it. I will just say that the guy's just coming off of a record of 5 straight poles, which we haven't had since Zanardi. Like stuff like that, where I'm just like, it's not that he hasn't had pace. There's just been a little bit of unluckiness. Then you get your pit lane speed violation at Mid Ohio or at Road America. It just feels like he just the running out of fuel at the oval at Gateway, like these things where on a typical year, like he doesn't typically run into all these problems. So I think once he kind of works through all these, the pace that he's bringing every week, he's going to be fine. Because even in these weekends where he's messing up and all these things seem to be going wrong, outside of Gateway, I mean, all of his performances I think have been top 5s, right? So like that's why like this gap is still above a race lead, and his bad weekends are so minimal that it makes it very hard for these guys to really close the gap. So we'll keep a close eye on that, but I'm interested to see, like this weekend will definitely be big, and then you have that doubleheader late in the season with Milwaukee. And if he can, I mean, obviously he finished second last year at Milwaukee after Rasmussen got by him, so it's not like he can't win there. But those ovals just do provide a lot more uncertainty. But even then, you look and the guys that are competing in the championship form right now aren't exactly better than him on ovals, right? Lundgaard, Kirkwood, and who I guess Malukas is maybe a little bit
Lucas and
better.
Award, yeah,
But Award, I guess Award's technically it. But yeah, I would say the guys that are two closest to him. I mean, Malukas is only 1 point back from Lundgaard. But that's the thing, is that none of them are nearly quite as balanced. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there's definitely room if someone can rip off like 3 or 4 race wins to close out the season. But I find it hard to believe that anyone who's in this competition right now like has the strength and the versatility to do that on a bunch of different courses. Especially, Kirkwood's going to have his street courses, Lindgaard's going to have his road courses, and then Award's going to have his ovals.
Yeah, and then I think kind of going to cover the top 5 there, but another notable mention is Renus. Again, as you said, he's had a pretty solid year with 4 top 10s and 2 top 5s, but he's found himself in 11th place. I know, for context, the best Juncos is at only finished 16th, so if he continues to trend the way he's at, he could even sneak into the top 10. So overall, it shows that like he's had solid results, but a consistent championship level season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then just looking at the race strategy, like I said, no one was really able to pull off anything different this year. I think, there were some attempts to do a 2-stopper. It just didn't really work because the Reds were degging too bad, or they just didn't seem fast either way. Like a lot of guys got off the Reds right away. Only a handful of people ran them more than once. So yeah, the winning strategy, Award ran an undercut his first stint on Lundgaard, tried to close his space a little, made that pass around mid stint, but on the second stint there, and then just ran a little overcut and was able to hold on for the rest of the race over Lundgaard. Yeah, not too much to it. I think whether he ran the red stint in the first or the third didn't really seem to make a difference. I think it really just came down to pace and Lundgaard making that mistake where he just got caught behind the lap car.
Yeah, I mean, it really just showed like in terms of strategy where like that last cycle, Award had no competition in terms of where he let out, and then with Lundgaard behind him. So he certainly did all the right pieces and found himself a pretty smooth way to victory.
Yeah, so I mean, besides Armstrong biggest mover, like that's kind of it. I don't know, like it was an entertaining race, but like it didn't. I don't know. To me, it was just a little. I was hoping for a little bit more drama later in the race, I guess, and without any caution, and with the way Award was able to hold off Lundgaard, it didn't really. It was kind of, a lot of anticlimactic a little bit. So I didn't really love this race. Some other people seem to have loved it a little more than I did, but I just kind of felt like there wasn't anything that was like making me have my eyes glued to the television.
Yeah, I mean, it was good. It's a good precursor to the World Cup that's been going on, and it's been a good partnership with Fox to have a new set of eyes. So looking forward to seeing and hoping that there's some ratings boost with that. I think to close out the general updates before we get into silly season, I think it's worth mentioning an update on the what's it called? The lowest people, the $1 million thing.
The leader circle.
Yeah, a little update on the leader circle. So not a lot of changes in terms of Mick Schumacher still at the bottom, Stingray Rob just above him, and Kyle Collette being the biggest jump, about 30 points between him and Stingray. Grosjean has found himself now in the danger zone at 22nd place, just having a pretty abysmal season overall. And Rasmussen, despite a good finish here, has still had enough DNFs to put him in 21st. Nolan has now also dropped himself into that similar kind of spot. I forget, is it the top 22 that make it?
Yeah, the bottom 3 are going to be out. So 23 through 25. Yeah, Collette, it's been, like I mean, he had a good weekend. So I think if he keeps it up, like him and Rasmussen have just been so similar in the fact that they've been in good positions all year. And whether it's just been their own accord or just, something like Collette's engine blowing up at Gateway versus him wrecking at Indy, both of those he was having strong days and nothing really came of it. So yeah, like I'll be interested to see. I think my guess would be Grosjean falls into the bottom 3 here, but yeah, it's yet to be seen.
Yep, and then in terms of the rookies, Dennis Hauger is slightly above Collette and Schumacher at 19th place with 148 points. So really has kind of cooled off since his initial kind of breakout season so far.
Yeah, I think that rookie of the year race will actually be pretty interesting. Collette, he's been really fast these last couple weeks, and the paddock has been noticing. So I think when it comes down to it, like between him and Hauger, we're gonna have a good competition, especially as we get on more ovals the next couple weeks. I think he can close that gap pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I think we have plenty to talk about in this next segment. As Jake mentioned, the biggest news is Dixon and Felix Rosenquist taking over Nolan Siegel and Christian Lundgaard's seats in McLaren, which creates a really unique dynamic of a three driver set that has a bunch of pedigree, but guys that I would not say that are in their twilight of their career, with the exception of Pato O'Ward.
Yeah, this move, it's it's something, man. I'm not the biggest fan of it. You know how much I love Dixon, but at the end of the day, you're letting someone who is literally, some oval talent away from competing for championships. And he already is competing for championships. He's having one of the best seasons on road courses outside of Alex Palou we've seen since, like, Will Power and Scott Dixon were in their primes, right? Like, it's just it's confusing to me that you spend all this time firing drivers, doing all this movement. You let Malukas go. You're unable to get Palou. You have all of this turnover and turmoil within your paddock, and you finally find a guy. You take him from RLL. He's consistent as hell. Every race, he's just on these road courses, on these street courses, he's been performing well. He's been outperforming your golden boy in Pato O'Ward at almost every race. And I get the frustrations on the ovals, but at the end of the day, this is only his second season in a car that's worth anything. I mean, you talk about how bad RLL was on the ovals when he was there, and realistically, Tony Kanaan was talking about it, but they've been trying to focus more on the Indy 500, and to me, it's like you're gonna hire a guy who obviously. Scott Dixon, notoriously unlucky at the Indy 500. Not saying he's a bad driver there. He's got the most lead laps ever, but that doesn't mean he's necessarily been in the competition the last 2 years. So I don't know if he's necessarily going to bring anything more than Lundgaard, right? Maybe a little bit, but at the end of the day, you really care about O'Ward. That's your best shot. And then Felix Rosenquist, you bring a guy back that you fired, and then on top of that, this guy, he's a good oval driver at the 500. He is good, but I don't really look at him as someone that is going to easily replicate what he did this year. I think when you talk about the speed of the Ganassi MSR cars, as well as just obviously having the luck of getting that restart and the fuel strategy. And he had a badass lap to finish that race. You can never take that win away from him. But is that someone that we're really going to expect to come out here and win another Indy 500? That's not exactly the first guy in my mind that I believe would do that. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents, Alan. What do you think?
No, I completely agree. I think, as you mentioned, this is a team where Lundgaard has as many wins and podiums this season as Rosenquist has in his career. And Dixon, while again is an absolute legend, they kind of called on the Tom Brady of IndyCar, which is a completely fair assessment, just given his pedigree. But again, it's not a guy that has been competing a lot this year. And I think it's interesting. So as you mentioned, David Land had a couple interviews with Tony Kanaan about this topic, and some of the tidbits that I found meaningful were, one, that Dixon came to McLaren first, so an intention that he wanted to get a change of scenery, which I think with the shorter deals and his age, is no surprise that there wasn't going to be Ganassi forever, and that McLaren does offer some lucrative things like the Rolex 24 and other endurance racing that Dixon may want to get into. But it is kind of unusual that with what seemed to be a good relationship with Chip, to abandon that, despite Chip actually providing some sort of counter offers to keep him at Ganassi. I think too, as you mentioned, Kanaan is focusing on the 500, which makes sense. I mean, the 500 is a crown jewel, but I think what Dixon can offer is history, a veteran experience, and the ability to tire and fuel save. And Rosenquist has Swedish meatballs, which both of them are required to win the 500, but are not exactly translatable to Pata, which is the ultimate goal here for the 500. Plus, between Tony Kanaan and Hunter Ray, that were already involved in that program, you've got a wealth of knowledge. I mean, I'm not saying that Dixon can't add to that, but like, what more incrementally are we going to get out of this? And then I think the last bit you said is what's going to happen 3 years from now, 4 years from now. I mean, these guys aren't going to be lasting much longer. And then Pato is going to be getting into his 30s. Like, what's your future? I mean, Lundgaard was the future for this team. I mean, you had it with Teo Porcher, you had it with Dave Malukas. It just seems like they're letting more and more talent walk away for this short-term game, which, yes, is the crown jewel, but you're never going to compete with Ganassi and Penske if you don't also invest in young talent. I think that's Palou and Malukas are perfect examples of that.
Yeah, from the Dixon side of things, understanding this decision, it really comes down for him. It really comes down to a chance to race in Le Mans. They're coming back to the hypercar division. I would assume that he was going to be penned in for one of those 3 seats. A chance to get 2/3 of the Triple Crown, right? As well as continue in sports cars into his late 40s. And then, you get that last big paycheck. And it sounded like, he brought this offer to Chip. Chip beat it, and then he brought it back to McLaren, and McLaren beat Chip's offer. So he gets an extra payday. He gets to, kind of go out on his terms. I mean, obviously, Chip was going to afford him that same luxury, but I really do think it comes down to the whole idea of McLaren, as well as the fact that Bruce McLaren was a Kiwi as well. So you have that history ties there. There's just a lot of things that I don't think Chip could offer him that McLaren can. And I'm sure that he'll have, obviously he can always have a role in the paddock around IndyCar, but maybe he wants to role managerial in different ways across motorsports. And, he's someone that's always been interested in other motorsports. So I'll be really interested how that develops, because I think that's really the key to this deal. But realistically, yeah, there's a lot of questions to compare to how their strategy has been with Lundgaard, Siegel, and O'Ward. Like, they had the youngest, pretty much, youngest big team in the paddock, and now they're kind of shifting 180 and literally like one of the older teams. So I'm really taken aback by it, but honestly, it just comes down to they want flashy moves that sponsors like. They want to win the 500, and they want to win on ovals. So, and maybe Zach Brown can finally get us on some more ovals, some bigger, at least some more super speedways. But this is not a move that's necessarily being made to enhance their long-term championship, and I think championship chances, and I think they understand that.
Yeah, and I think that's the risk we'll take, and we'll certainly keep an eye on it, and maybe we'll eat our words here in 2 to 3 years. But for now, it's kind of where our spots are going. But again, I think this segues a lot really well into silly season, which I think the most talked about is going to be the number 9 seat, the one that's been untouched for 24 years, and I think is a very lucrative and very valuable pay seat for Ganassi.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the last time a seat like this has come open, obviously the 12 last year, phenomenal seat to come open. But with the way that Penske has been these last couple of years, I would not put it on the same tier as getting into a Ganassi, with Mike Hull potentially still being there as the engineer, as a crew chief on that car. You're talking about as good of a seat as you'll ever see come open in IndyCar. And yeah, I think Chip, I could see him doing something different. But at the same time, when you do have someone with potential of Christian Lundgaard, with the ability to coach him up on the ovals and get a lot of great people around him, it seems like it's going to be a 1-for-1 swap. And then you're going to have the guy who's third or fourth in the championship with the guy who's won the last 3, right? And I wonder, like how is anyone going to stop that? Like, you're going to have those two, and then I'm sure Simpson will return with the budget on top of that, and he's not been exactly bad. So I don't know. Like, do you see anything else really happening? I mean, it's kind of too early to see the F2 guys, or I don't really see them picking up an Indy next guy.
Yeah, I agree. I think with this valuable of a seat, Chip's not going to take too many risks, and Lundgaard is a proven IndyCar talent. I mean, he's top 3 in the points right now. And to you saying, like, Palou doesn't have a lot of oval talent, but has enough. Again, he's won the 500, so
Well, he
it's
used to not, and then look what he became,
exactly.
right?
So
And he
I think
and
it's
it's like Lundgaard's in the same place. I mean, he's 24,
absolutely.
and he was and now look at how far Pelot has won. I mean, multiple time race winner on ovals.
Yeah, I think too, he has the raw talent in street and road, and Chip and Hole are more than capable of giving them a car and teaching them how to drive ovals. So I think it's a to me a no brainer that is an easy slot, and then you have what seems to be the most fearsome team in IndyCar. So I think that's would be surprising. The only other person I could possibly think of would be Linus Lundqvist. I mean, someone who got a podium in his first year at Ganassi, has some relationship with that paddock, and has been hindered by a lack of money. Whereas like this seat is a pay seat, so he has worry as much about getting sponsorships, but it's a more of a risk than an established driver like Lundgaard, who has had a couple more races under his belt.
Yeah, I think VK would maybe be the only other name I see thrown around there. But just to keep moving on, so all the Penske drivers are returning. Power and Kirkwood are both returning, and then the 28 seat with Ericsson is kind of the next biggest seat that's available. That is something that I'm very interested in. Obviously, they offered Rosenquist the seat, and he declined. So I'm wondering what's their next move? Do they hold on to Ericsson, who has had his moments, but has also been, I'd say, altogether a disappointment in his time at Andretti, or do they go out into the paddock and find someone? My opinion is that Rinus VK seems to be the best option for anyone available. I mean, the only difficult thing with him is that he has not really been fast in Hondas, but I think that's been more to do with being in a DCR car than anything. So someone who, yeah, like we've talked enough about him. He's clearly talented enough and just has not found his way into one of these seats. And this seems to be the first time that the stars have aligned. I know last year there was almost none of those seats open. So the first time that the stars have aligned, it really makes sense for him to make this jump. I believe he's only 24 years old. So yeah.
No, I agree. I think to your point, the stars aligning is a big factor in this. And while I think Ericsson, it may be premature departure, it just when you already start fishing out his seat and it feels like he's on is 1 foot out the door, I just can't imagine they can recover from a relationship standpoint. If I'm Ericsson, why would I want to come back if a team that's looking at me as a movable pawn? So I think I just don't. Yeah, I think it would make sense to move on and find another young talent, especially when they already have Will Power as a veteran driver in that same spot.
Yeah, yeah. So I could see that kind of being a move where you're trying to get another young face in to kind of replace Herta, as someone like Ericsson has just seemed to, play out his cards there. We'll see. I think if he has a great weekend this weekend, and he still has time, I think, to fight for the seat. It's not exactly something that I think is confirmed quite yet. They may take a little while, but obviously you don't want to let a guy like VK wait around too long. So yeah, then the next seat to look at is the Myers Shank 66. So Marcus Armstrong has actually moved into the lead car, the number 60, for I believe a multi-year contract. So he is kind of stepping up and filling the gap where Rosenquist is leaving. Obviously finished fifth at the Indy 500 and has continued to improve. But the 66 seat is the junior Chip Ganassi seat. So this is something, obviously, if you're going to have a Lundgaard going to the 9, maybe you're not going to fit into that very soon, but you always have that opportunity. So, different options. This is where maybe a Lundgaard or a Linus Lundqvist returns. But what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is that Kyle Collette seems to be the guy that's penned in for this right now, just because he's shown such great pace at times and has been, I think, to everyone's belief, the more exciting rookie between him and Hauger.
Yeah, I think it's so long as Foyt doesn't keep him as a Penske junior driver, a Penske kind of pipeline there, I think he would definitely go to Myers. And I think you talked about this a few weeks ago, it wouldn't have been as attractive of an offer, but Collette has made so many strides of late and has shown really the most impressiveness on ovals that he does seem like a very lucrative pick for that 66 car.
Yeah. So that's something that will continue to develop, but he's definitely going to be moving to a different seat unless they really feel like the Penske must give him a good offer. But with, I don't know, maybe Newgarden, like I said, maybe a Newgarden or McLaughlin move on after a year, but it's just, yeah, there's no guarantee. So I could see him staying put as well, but we're going to go with that for now. And then looking up next, the number 30 RLL, it seems like Schumacher is staying put with the sponsors and everything. I don't really know who else would really want him. He would probably have to move to a worse seat to really find anything else, because obviously he's last in points. And I think with how competitive the paddock is right now, teams are kind of clamoring for talent, young talent, and he's just not really found any footing in the sport thus far.
Correct. I think the Schumacher experience more or less has, I think, been a failure overall. But with the name and the money that he provides, it really is ultimately up to him whether or not he wants to continue this route or pivot to a different series in some other way. I mean, it's only been 1 year, so I think he still probably wants to try it again. But I don't see, again, to your point, much other teams wanting to grab him unless either RLL moved on or Juncos, another team, needs a pay driver.
Yeah, and Schumacher, I know he had some success in close wheel cars, but when it comes to the open wheel, yeah, like he was in WEC last year, and won some races, got some podiums. So obviously with an endurance team there, I think he may be attracted to coming back to something like that, but he does seem to like the open wheel stuff, but it doesn't seem to like him very much. So, yeah. And then I think this is kind of the first curveball team when you talk about the AJ Foyt team. So from what I've heard, like Ferrucci has kind of played his time out there. He's in like 19th in the points or something, 17th. Hasn't really, he's had his moments here or there the last couple of years, but this year it's just been a little flat on the road and street especially, and it doesn't seem to really be going anywhere, and I think it's when you kind of have this relationship with Penske, there's a certain expectation that you're at least, putting together a team, results you're proud of, or a team that is, or a team that's developing. And when you're doing neither of those things, then it's kind of a wasted seat. So Ferrucci, unfortunately, has been so good at the 500, but I think might be relegated to a 500 only seat for 2027.
Yeah, I think the parallels to Daly are starting to become more clear, where he has the bits, but I think we've kind of seen his ceiling in terms of what he can do from a series driver. That doesn't mean he can't make great strides at the 500, but yeah, I think as with the partnership with Penske, that Foyt is becoming more valuable and just not something that's worth Ferrucci, especially when you have so many young talents that can fill that instead.
Yeah, and with that, I believe that there's been some rumors that Andretti is kind of lower on Hauger than they were coming into the season. He was seen to be the heir apparent to the 28 car. Now the rumors are flying around that he may not return to DCR because that he doesn't need to be under a junior team of Andretti anymore. And if you're someone like him, you kind of had a rough season, but you feel like you're still in the rookie of the year contention. You feel like you've brought a lot of good things to the sport. Like if you're not going to get in that Andretti seat next year, then you probably should make a move to a better team. So I think this is an opportunity for him to move into the 14, somewhere with a lot more old talent than DCR, as well as the ability to just have a more well-rounded appearance being around a Penske car. So I could see that happening definitely if, depending. It all kind of starts with that first domino with what happens with Andretti's 28 car.
Agreed. And I think it's worth talking about too that, like, while Newgarden and McLaughlin are signed for this year, the next year and the following years aren't exactly set in stone. And Penske is by no means a man that is willing to hold on to a talent longer than they need to. And I wouldn't say that McLaughlin and Newgarden being top 10 in points is a bad thing, but I think both of them, it seems to be on a declining slope in terms of their overall series performances. So I wouldn't be surprised if when those
McLaughlin doesn't exactly compete for wins anymore. I mean, this is someone 2-3 years ago was consistently competing for wins on especially on road courses, and now you're watching and you hardly even notice him anymore.
Correct. I mean, it pains me, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it pains me as a fan, but yeah, I mean, I think both of those guys really aren't being talked about right now. So again, it wouldn't be like if you're Hauger, it's not terrible, like, to kind of sit the sideline for 1 or 2 years at Foyt and look at those Penske seats, because it's clear that pipeline is trying to be developed there, and those are very lucrative options.
Yeah, and I think that's a better solution than that's a championship car, and at least it was, and Andretti hasn't been. So right there, you're talking about going to a better seat and having a better chance of getting in a championship car, which I think he'll be more of a championship contender than he will be a 500 guy. So I think that's a better idea for him. So yeah, that's the 14, and then with the 4, if Collette leaves, Miles Rowe. This is one I'm pretty confident about. If either the 14 or the 4 that Miles Rowe will be slotted into. He's had a lot of success in ovals. Penske really wants him in this seat from what I've heard. All the rumors I've heard, this is the guy. Obviously, he's got room to improve on the road and street, but when it comes to the ovals, he's been dominating Indy Next. Makes sense to me. Like they're going to want, obviously they're going to want, someone who's an African American to step into the sport with how much, eyes that brings to the sport. So everything kind of points to that. I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah, I mean, a guy that's top 5 or top 10? Top 10 in points in Indy Next, has had solid talent. I think is fairly obvious connections with Penske. You see him in the paddock, in the pit stands with that team. So certainly has a strong relationship with that group and has shown some which oval talent is something that Penske certainly values. So it feels, to your point, like almost a shoe in that regard.
Mm-hmm. So he's going to be in. Yeah, I bet he'll be in that seat. And then you look at Juncos Hollinger, and with Nolan Siegel obviously being booted from the number 6 car, he has that budget. It seems to be this will be the place that he lands. Obviously, he's familiar with the Chevy. He had a decent weekend. He's had a couple the last couple of weeks. It's not that he's horrible. He's not Stingray Rob bad, and I think this is where they finally pull the plug on Stingray when they can find another pay driver. But this does get interesting with the fact that Juncos and Hollinger are looking to break up, and you're talking about maybe that both of them are 1-car teams where Hollinger and potentially
Dry
Reinbold or another investor. There's a lot of people that have been rumored to come into the sport, maybe throw some money around, hopefully more efficiently than Prema, but seems like that he's potentially going to find his way into one of those seats. It seems to be kind of a step up from Stingray, who has never made the Fast 12, into someone who at least is respectable in the car and is going to bring a lot of budget.
Correct. I think it just goes to show how the field in IndyCar has improved dramatically enough that we are no longer kind of scraping the barrel of guys who can pay, but now we have this separate tier of guys that can pay, but guys that are more talented. So I think as a general series, it'd be exciting to see Siegel move into that. And yeah, I think it's Juncos is, again, with a smaller team looking for some funding, and Siegel certainly provides that.
Yeah, and then the 78, this is where it gets a little interesting. I think you could get one of these top 3 Indy Next guys. So that's either Enzo Fittipaldi, who just swept the weekend. What was he? He's pole to win, correct?
Yep, back-to-back in Ohio.
Yeah, so great weekend by him. Pushed him into first place by 17 points. And then Timek Kucharczyk, he's Polish. I think I did my best there. I've heard, has been pretty pacey. He's someone who, has had a win this year, not quite as consistent as maybe Nikita Johnson or Fittipaldi, but someone who has been a lot of fun. I think that he has a good shot, and then Nikita Johnson as well, who was in the lead, I think, until last weekend for the championship. So those guys seem to kind of have built a gap between the rest. I mean, Max Taylor's in 4th with 100 points back from where the rest of them are within 20. So it seems like those 3 are 2 of those 3 guys are probably going to find their way into the sport, seeing that we typically have around 3 rookies, and there is a good amount of talent in Indy Next this year. So I'd say, pick your choice. Right now, I'm leaning Fittipaldi, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning too that the champion of the Indy Next series will be provided a scholarship. So there is some funding that regards of a couple races that
I think it's 3 races plus the 500. I believe that's what the scholarship is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that gives you some budget.
Correct. There's a meaningful incentive, especially for those smaller teams, to pick up a next guy because there is some support. And the only thing that would derail this is Juncos kind of maintaining the strategy of a backed talent driver and then a pay driver. So this year it's Rob and VK, if you have Siegel in that pace seat, you could consider someone like Callum Ilott, who has experience with
Linus, yeah,
Juncos.
Linus Lundqvist, something like
Correct.
that.
Yeah,
Or
one of
or
those
you go
guys
into
that
the
kind of
F2 pool.
one of those guys that balances out the talent on track and yeah, talent on track, but needs some support financially.
Yeah, yes, that kind of wraps up the JHR seats, and then finally Dale Coyne. And talking through this, I do, Grosjean is someone who's gonna, fight to be in that seat. Has always found a way to get some sponsors because they obviously a former F1 driver. But I wonder if Marcus Ericsson will likely slot into here. Someone who obviously is worth keeping in the sport. I think he's clearly proven, even though he's not necessarily winning races right now, that even if the 500 alone gives you that extra edge. So I bet that he finds his way into this 18 seat. How does that sound?
Yeah, I think it's before all the shuffles, it was rumored that Grosjean would stay simply because he's got good relationship with the team and can bring money. But to your point, I mean, we're looking at we're have the luxury of being selective now. You look at similar profiles of guys that are marketable, former F1, have brands and some talent on track. Ericsson, I think you have the nod of the 500 and those bits that make him even more, I think, valuable and marketable for sponsors. And Dale Coyne, again, is looking for someone who can provide enough funding. So it'd be hard pressed to choose Grosjean over Ericsson unless Ericsson is seeing the writing on the wall and maybe tries to pivot to a different series. So I think if Ericsson wants to stay, he'll likely be in the seat. Otherwise, he'd be going to Grosjean.
Yeah, I think Ericsson wants to be around IndyCar. He seems to, he seems to really enjoy it when he does well. But I feel like that feels. This is crazy though. I mean, if everything comes, or at least some of this comes true, I mean, only one guy we predicted to stay in his seat so far from all these free agents. So, with Dixon leaving, it's really kind of, and Lundgaard getting kicked out, it's really unpeeled some wacky stuff as it is silly season. But the last seat is, I think the number 19 DCR, I think we'll go to another Indy Next guy. And I think it just depends, is the Indy Next champ going to go to Juncos because they think they can make it into one of the Chevy teams, or they go to the DCR because they think they can make it into one of the Hondas. So it kind of depends year to year, I think, where the Indy Next champ is gone. I guess what Rasmussen went to ECR. You have obviously DCR has Hauger now. Who else was Indy Next champ the last couple of years?
Lundqvist with that one.
Abel was Lundqvist went to Ganassi. Abel went to DCR. So they kind of bounce around, but it seems to typically, depending on which guys they're pressing up. So that's kind of our preview there. Again, I'll put up the list: Lundgaard to CGR, Colette to MSR, VK to Andretti, Schumacher staying put, Hauger to AJ Foyt, Rowe to AJ Foyt, Siegel to Juncos, and then kind of up in there either one of the Indy Next guys or Ilott to the 78, and then Grosjean / Ericsson for that 18, probably Ericsson, and then another Indy Next guy for the 19.
Yep. So back to our regularly scheduled program, which is the IndyCar series as it is going on. The next race in our circuit is Nashville Superspeedway. So this formerly end of season, now bumped up to kind of the mid season, is the third running of the Nashville Superspeedway, formerly a street course on the downtown Nashville, but with the construction of Nissan Stadium, was moved to this track. A tri-oval, which I think has performed pretty solid given IndyCar's oval packages, but is still kind of a hard race to market, just given the fact that it is so far away from actual Nashville. Despite the name, it's a 1.3 mile tri-oval in Lebanon, Tennessee.
Yeah, so this is a pretty interesting situation when it comes to the schedule. So the race is going to follow the end of the World Cup final here on July 19th. And so the start of the race is kind of just dependent on when they kind of cut away. So the idea was that this was the season finale the year prior, but they thought that the best way to get a ratings bump around the Indy 500 or around IndyCar outside of the Indy 500 is to do it put an oval at this race because they could have put, Markham, anything like that, but they decided instead to put this here. So really hoping that the race is more similar to last year because I think the year before that it was a little bit more of a snooze fest. I think I had football practice, so I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but yeah, it was a pretty entertaining race last year. Obviously, Newgarden picking up the win after what was ended up being his worst season in IndyCar, and Penske getting their first win. So yeah, obviously, like you said, 2001 IRL and NASCAR, and the last couple of years have been a fairly entertaining. And then Herta won the first running. So yeah, it's just a good oval. Like I said, they get up a little bit faster, which is nice. That versus most of our short ovals, they don't get nearly as fast. So you get a little bit more of that thrill, a little bit of high line. Just they seem to figure out the tire because I know the tires were kind of failing that first year, and they've definitely found a lot better performance the last race. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I think the fact that it's after the final is significant, given that we had a pretty notable ratings. But I forget, was it Detroit or Road America that was following after like a World Cup group match, and it
Yeah,
ended up being
Road
like
America.
almost like yeah, it was almost like 1.8 to almost 2 million, which is really high for a midseason race like that. So I think it's notable the correlation between that, and yeah, I think it's if you're going to showcase anything in IndyCar, an oval is what seems to be the most appealing to new fans. So it's a good opportunity. Again, props to Fox for actually like meaningfully putting some thought into like, oh, how do we market the sport? How do we actually provide new fan and growth? So excited for the potential there. I mean, as you and I we're gonna watch it either way. So
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting that in that attempt to move up the start of the game for England, I wonder if Fox, I don't know how much pushback they have on the World Cup scheduling, but with the IndyCar race being scheduled when it was, if the England-Mexico game, what they would have done with the TV window, because it would have been horrible to be bumped to FS1 because of that. But I don't know. I'm sure they at least came up at some point. Hopefully, they're like, hey, we don't want to kick down our part, that we own this part of the series down, but. Anyway, just kind of looking at a preview of how the teams have done the last couple years.
Do you want to throw in the street course bit because of the standing being done?
Oh yeah. So like I said, as we talked about, this is our third race here since we came back in 24, and the interesting thing is this might be our last. They've been doing the street race the last couple of years prior to this, which you attended. And the stadium, yeah, look at you, bro. The stadium is set to be done in 2027, so they could race on the street course again in 2027. So I wonder, because this has produced some pretty good racing, if that would be something they'd want to move back to or just scrap it. And seeing that, I mean, we're going to Markham. I guess that doesn't really add a street course. We're going to DC, but it doesn't sound like we're doing that again. So we don't necessarily have a street course to replace it, but I'd rather have ovals than street courses personally.
Yeah, I think it's more of the spectacle of it. Like I think as a fan who attended the second running in 22, it was more of a novelty to have it that close to Broadway and have the music, have the concerts and the festivities and the general atmosphere more so than the race. The race itself was really lovingly known as Crashville because of the chaos that it provided. So yes, I think to your point, from an overall purist standpoint, ovals are preferred. But if there's a way to finagle it in, I think it was an enjoyable kind of a marquee event for fans.
Yeah, so just looking at how these teams have performed here, so the average qual for most of these teams, like it seems like Penske has been fastest here, Meyer-Shank just behind them with an 8, and then Ganassi with 8.5, and Andretti just a hair slower. But when it comes to actual race pace, Ganassi has been the best on average finish, but Penske and Andretti have both picked up wins here. So I think those top 3 teams are pretty even there. I mean, Meyer-Shank hasn't quite performed as well in the race, so it'll be interesting to see as obviously Rosenqvist has found his stride on ovals, if maybe he brings something special. But when it comes to driver performances, Newgarden has been obviously dominant here. She, finishing 1 and 3 in the 2 runnings here. McLaughlin as well, just behind him. So, I'll be interested to see if Penske can find their groove again, going off of what happened last year. But, Palou, I will say he had an average finish of 6.5, but one of those was when I think the championship was still in the balance. So he was kind of be a little more careful, right? So maybe I think he actually does have a lot of pace here.
Yeah, so with that, I think it's worth talking about our usual predictions here. So, per the rules, no Pelot on any race, right? Despite ovals not being a strong suit, and then sticking with one favorite and kind of one underdog. So, from my perspective, the favorite for me would be Newgarden. Kind of hard to bet against that guy in any sort of oval. He's been a bit kind of out of the news lately with the injured foot that he received back in the 500. I mean, it's kind of something he's been nursing for a while, but someone that just turns on a different gear when it comes to ovals, and one who won it last year. So I'd be hard pressed not to choose Newgarden for this.
Yeah. I mean, he had the fastest lap last race. We didn't even mention that, and it's his left foot. You don't break that much on these ovals. I think you break a little on this one, but not nearly as much as you do on those road and street courses.
Yeah. And then do you want me to do my...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then for my underdog, the numbers really don't say it well, but I think just looking at this year's blurb, Ericsson, I think he was one that really was competing for the win with Newgarden at Gateway not too long ago, another tri-oval. So I could see him with a little bit of a lit fire under him, possibly losing a seat at Andretti to really pursue a win here in an oval.
Yeah. I mean, Ericsson obviously looked really good at Gateway. Hasn't really performed here. His best finish is 15th, but might be able to keep him in that seat. So maybe you might be counting against your prediction from earlier with this one. But Andretti obviously picked up the win here with Herta a few years ago. So in the same vein, my underdog pick to kind of go backwards off of you is Kyle Kirkwood. He's finished 6th and 4th here in the 2 races. And obviously got his first oval win at Gateway last year. Someone who I think is continually improved on these short ovals. So someone that they clearly have something in the setup here with Andretti. So there's a good chance that he gets after it, even though he's maybe a little more under the radar when it comes to these short ovals. And then finally, my favorite, the 2025 runner-up here, the perennial runner-up, Pato O'Ward. I think that, he's coming off of a great week last week, his first podium of the year. Like, that's insane that his first win is his first podium. Like, he hasn't had a podium all year, but he has been so close. There's so many 4th, 5th place finishes. I think he just kind of blows the whole thing open. His average finish here is 4.5. Obviously, a little slower the first year. The great run last year, just right behind Newgarden. So as long as Newgarden makes a mistake somewhere along the line, then I think he'll have a chance. But yeah, we'll see. I think that he's got a real shot, especially with the confidence he's going to be bringing.
Yeah. So again, look forward to that July 19th following the completion of the World Cup final.
Yeah, so hopefully by the next time we're talking to you, we have a little bit more information on the silly season. Maybe we'll look dumb, maybe we'll look smart. But after that, we do have the Portland race, the only Bulls actually have a title sponsor, Grand Prix of Portland, August 9th. So yeah, Alan is going to be in Ireland at that point. So we'll have one more episode until our format, I think, might change to a little bit more of a free flowing, just because we're going to have to do it right after the races. But until then, we'll get you one more good episode following the Borchetta Bourbon Music City Grand Prix. But yeah, exciting. A lot of exciting things coming. A lot of, silly season has not disappointed so far. And hopefully we've got a championship fight. So a lot of good things coming for IndyCar. Yeah. Well, with that, I am Jake Langdon.
And I'm Alan Langdon.
And we'll catch you soon, race fans.